All right, welcome back. In case you're just joining us, it's time for our second interview. Shubham Chaudhuri, who is the country director, World Bank for Nigeria, is joining me at the table. Hello, Shubham. Welcome. Happy New Year. Good to see you again. Marco Hernandez is the lead economist for Nigeria. World Bank is also joining us virtually. Hello, Mr. Hernandez. How are you?
Good morning, Nancy. Thank you very much for having us here.
Okay, welcome both. Let's get started. If we take a look at the GDP growth for 2019, for Nigeria, it finished at around 2.24%. So it seemed that Nigeria's economy walked into 2020 with that GDP growth, but straight into a recession. Shubham, was it more COVID-19 induced, or were there already cracks pre-pandemic that were exhumed because of COVID-19?
So, Nancy, clearly it was COVID-19 induced in the sense that the fall in oil prices, the downturn globally, had a first-order impact on Nigeria. The thing to ask, though, is whether Nigeria was best placed, the economy was best placed to quickly recover. And that's where what we would say is 2.2+% growth in 2019 was good. It was a slow recovery, but that's not nearly enough for what Nigeria needs to get to really lift all the 100 million people, Nigerians, out of poverty. And so Nigeria was slowly recovering and actually should have been accelerating when the COVID crisis hit. So the COVID crisis was directly responsible for the recession, but the underlying structural issues will need to be dealt with to help Nigeria recover quickly.
Okay, let me come to Marco. Marco, if you can hear me, this report is titled Nigeria's rising to the challenge, Nigeria's COVID response. What is making this report so different from other reports that you had released?
Thank you again, Nancy, for having us. And I think the main message from this report is really about trying to rise from this unprecedented crisis. COVID-19 has shocked all countries, and Nigeria is one of the countries that has been affected the most because it is heavily dependent on oil and also from investment from abroad. So it really needs to take this as an opportunity to come together as a country to reach consensus on key reforms and try to rise to this unprecedented crisis in a way that the country ends up building back better, trying to really improve those foundations that, as Shubham was saying, would eventually help the country make progress towards that very ambitious target of lifting 100 million Nigerians out of poverty. And in order to do that, there are a series of structural challenges that would need to be addressed, but we believe there is an opportunity to do so and to make sure that once the economy and the global economy start to recover, Nigeria could really harness those benefits and create the many jobs that it needs.
Okay, let me come back to Shubham. In what ways has COVID-19 pandemic impacted Nigeria's economy?
So, Nancy, I will come to that, but if I may, you asked what differentiates this report. I think one thing I do want to point out to your audience here is we try to put this in a historical perspective, right? Okay. The markets, most people who track the economy focus on what's happening next week, what's happening in the next year. I think for Nigeria, it really matters to take a look back 4 decades. One of the things we highlight, a basic fact that all Nigerians, we hope, are aware of, is with the recession in 2020, per capita incomes on an inflation-adjusted basis, meaning what purchasing power that ordinary Nigerians have, was about what it was in 1980. That's 4 decades, of ups and downs. And so the picture of Nigeria's economy, its development progress, is one of basically beyond the surface of an ocean, being buffeted by the swells of oil prices going up, going down. And that's, I think, trying to put that in historical perspective is one of the things we point out in this report to say that, look, this is a critical juncture for Nigeria. Where Nigeria goes as it comes out. Is it kind of enough to just think about a recovery as Nigeria had following the 2016 recession? We would argue no, because even if we hope the economy recovers pretty quickly, but if we go back to 1%, 2%, that's still below the population growth rate. Think about the 3 million young Nigerians who come out, reach working age, who have these aspirations, that the economy has to provide the opportunities for them to realize those aspirations. So that's what we were trying to do, to put this in a historical perspective and say, look, this is a time to say it's certainly an opportunity, but in some ways it's a necessity. You don't know what the next swell is going to be. Even with oil prices moving up over the last few months, we don't know whether that's going to keep going or whether there's going to be another downturn.
So in essence, this recession that we're facing right now definitely is the worst that we've seen so far. So 2016 recession is better in a way, somewhat, than this. So how has COVID-19 impacted the economy and exacerbated our sickness?
So COVID-19 for Nigeria most directly was the fall in oil prices. So the kind of drop you saw in oil prices back in February and March of 2020, that was unprecedented. And that because of the overall dependence of the Nigerian economy and the government's own fiscal position on oil prices and frankly the balance of payments, the foreign exchange reserves. That was the direct impact on Nigeria in a way that other countries maybe did not quite face as much of an impact. Beyond that, obviously the global downturn. This has been, globally, it's been one of the deepest recessions that we've seen in a long, long time, decades. So that obviously has spillover impacts on Nigeria. So COVID has impacted by just the oil prices, what it does to the disposable income, the kind of the spending on a variety of sectors of the economy. It has had an impact in terms of the lockdown. Certainly the retail trades, anything that requires face-to-face interaction, tourism, travel, all of these have been impacted. Going forward, some of these are going to start coming back, but there's an uncertainty about it because of, we have to see how well the vaccination efforts globally work before things can get back to some semblance of a new normal. Okay, so all of those, so COVID has had a dramatic impact on the Nigerian economy. The point we're again trying to make is that Nigeria was not best placed to absorb that shock. And so really to recover quickly, Nigeria in some ways can't just do business as usual, it needs to do more.
All right, let me come to Marco. And taking it from where Shubham stopped, that Nigeria was not best placed even before COVID struck. But reading your reports, COVID-19 has made government take some certain actions. So can you go through some of those reforms according to what you put in the report, that COVID-19 really forced the government to do certain things? What are those things?
Right. No, absolutely. I think it is very important to highlight what the government has done so far to try to mitigate the impacts of the shock. And we saw that in 2020, the government did take very critical actions that will once again lay the foundations to really build back better and take the opportunity to address those concerns and promote growth and job creation going forward. One of them has been the reform to the fuel subsidy. The fuel subsidy was costing billions of US dollars to the Nigerian economy that could otherwise have been used to invest in education, in health, in social protection, and infrastructure. In a similar way, we have the reform that has been advanced on electricity to try to not only improve the policy so that you can bring more investment into the power sector, which is the oxygen of the economy, critical for promoting growth, but in addition also to reduce the fiscal costs that electricity subsidies were imposing on the federal budget, and also some of the policies that I want to highlight have to do with not only making sure that you safeguard the revenues and the resources that the Nigerian government has, but also to put those resources to better uses. And one critical example has been the adoption of the amended budgets in 2020, not only from the federal government side, which tried to use the opportunity of the crisis to reprioritize the spending, but also to do that across the 36 states in Nigeria. This is the first time that the 36 states have come together to promote a let's say, the adoption of amended budgets in a way that includes a COVID response, and to do so within the year, to really reprioritize those expenditures. I think that is critical, not only for transparency, but also to make the most out of the resources in a time when revenues are down, when remittances are down. Let's recall that remittances usually were a lifeline in previous crises, especially during the recession in 2015 and 16, for example. But in 2020, they fell by more than 25%. That's what we estimate. And 1 in 2 Nigerians live in a household that receive remittances. So if you have households that are right now seeing a reduction in their earnings, they do need the support also from the state to stimulate the economy. So making the most in terms of safeguarding those revenues, putting those revenues to better uses, these are some of the critical actions that have been taken. We also want to highlight that there were important moves to try to strengthen the transparency around monetary policy. We believe that is a critical area that needs to continue going forward. We believe that there is room for continuous improvement in monetary and exchange rate policy that would help to attract much needed investment to support the recovery, because right now we're projecting very modest growth of just over 1% in 2021 at a time when the population is growing at about 2.6%. So that means that per capita incomes are expected to go down, and that would have an impact on the money that households will be receiving at the end of the day. So much has been done, but much more needs to be done given the unprecedented crisis and the fact that the Nigerian economy was fragile to begin with.
Okay, Marco, I'll come back to you with what are the things that should still be done, some of the reforms that will be done. But let me come back to Shubham with the question around how is the World Bank engaging Nigeria, especially around COVID-19, because we saw even during the COVID crisis, for example, IMF came up with a facility for Nigeria, the Rapid Credit Facility, $3.4 billion. Can you take us through some assistance and engagement? I remember the last time we spoke, there was a time we spoke via Zoom in the heat of the lockdown. I think after the interview, you went into a meeting with the Vice President and all of that, or you came out from a meeting just for the interview. But just tell us how the World Bank is engaging with Nigeria and what assistance so far.
So thank you, Nancy. I think I always tell people that do not think of the World Bank as a donor. We're not a donor. Nigeria is a shareholder of the World Bank, and we're here to help support Nigeria deal with the immediate crisis, as well as go back on a path to where 100 million Nigerians can rise out of poverty. So what we've tried to do is both, financing where it's needed, but more important in some ways is really trying to provide ideas and suggestions about how other countries have dealt with the situation, what are the kinds of things that government might want to consider. So it's a combination of those two things. First and foremost, we focused on how can we help the government marshal the fiscal resources. Okay? Part of this is like the IMF did, we stand ready to provide financing where we can. But we said, look, let's not begin with just how much financing we can provide. Let's think about how do you meet the entire need that you have, which will involve both financing from us, but also things that government itself can do to either redirect expenditures or find savings elsewhere. So as part of that, and we have, our board has approved over the course of 2020 over $4.7 billion in new financing.
Oh.
Part of it,
$4.7 billion in new financing
has
Nigeria. Approved,
meaning it's available for Nigeria. Some of it you will have heard about, and I've talked about in the past. For example, $750 million for the Nigeria Cares program. What it is COVID action, recovery, and economic stimulus. It's entirely directed and available for the states. So each of the 36 states to take proactive action to help communities provide, employment opportunities through public works and other schemes, to help farmers get prepared, to make sure that agricultural supply chains are maintained, and to provide support for micro and small enterprises. That's one example. There's another $750 million to the states to help shore up the state's fiscal position. a lot of these programs that we've put our financing for, they're based on what we call results-based financing. The idea is that government has certain results that it wants to achieve, whether it's individual executive governors of states or federal ministers, and we have a very simple proposition that we will help here to support you achieve those results, and on achievement of those results, we will come in
So
with
in
the
other
financing.
words, show me the actions, you get the money.
That's right.
That's
And this is part of what we owe to the Nigerian people, that we often get hear accusations or claims that, look, the World Bank, we're putting Nigeria into more debt, okay? Because our financing is concessional, but it is credits, right? In the sense that Nigeria will have to repay. The terms are much better than Nigeria would have
what
available.
is the interest rate like? Averagely?
Yeah, so basically it's longer maturities, usually about 20 to 30 years, usually a grace period of 7 to 10 years, meaning no interest payments. And the interest rate itself, the total cost of financing, is usually around, I hesitate to say this, but it's around, because it varies, but around 2% a year.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let me come back to you, Marco, with the other question, which is, what other steps do you think that the Nigerian government can take at this time so that we can recover quickly?
I think that there are 5 key areas that we highlight in the Nigeria Development Update. The first one has to do with the containment of the outbreak. COVID-19 is still with us, and it's not going away anytime soon. So it's very important to contain the spread of the virus, and of course to continue to prepare for the virus to spread even more. I mean, we're seeing second waves already in many places, including in Nigeria. The second area is really about macro management, and that's critical for boosting investor confidence. And in particular, we see that there's an opportunity to allow exchange rates to be more flexible so that they can reflect market fundamentals. This would help to attract the investment that left Nigeria in 2020 and to retain it. I think it would also help to preserve reserves, which are much needed to be able to have a cushion for when the next shock comes. And also, we believe that it would help to reduce inflation, which, as you know, is very high. And you were showing the numbers just before this interview. It's already almost close to 16% at the end of 2020. So that's very high. And inflation is eventually a very, very big tax, especially for the poor. So macro management is critical. Mobilizing revenues is the third area. Here, I think we believe that there's an opportunity to take specific actions that we that will help to generate more tax revenue without impacting growth. And here, for example, one area that we see as critical is tax exemptions. Right now, there are a lot of tax exemptions that are not assessed for their efficiency, and that's an opportunity to generate more resources in the relatively short term. Another one is to, once again, make the most out of the resources that we have. And here, the continuation of reforms on the power sector, on fuel subsidies, and other subsidies as well will really help to reprioritize the spending so that at a time when we have fewer resources, we can deploy them into more productive uses. So then you have the macro, the virus, the expenditure area, and we see the final one to be really about supporting core economic activity, especially for the support of families that right now are facing vulnerability. We're projecting that because we have lower growth, we have higher inflation, and we have fewer jobs as well, that poverty is going to increase. We are estimating that between 15 to 20 million more Nigerians are going to be falling into poverty between 2020 and 2022.
Marco, let me just still stick with you a bit around the issue about stagflation, which you've just pointed out in terms of inflation, higher inflation, 15.75% close for 2020. Unemployment is high. We also have underemployment rate high. So that means that the misery index in Nigeria is close to 70% from my last account. What sector do you think would lead the recovery? Because what I also saw in your report is that about that COVID-19, that many households lost jobs in 2020, unemployed workers migrated back to the low productivity agricultural sector. So does it mean that perhaps this recovery that we're expecting, that the agri sector will lead it, it grew in 2020, but very marginal? And despite government's effort, especially in that sector.
Mm-hmm. So I think, if we take a step back, the first thing is that COVID-19 will impact all economic sectors, but some of them will be impacted more than others. So you have retail trade, you have construction, you have manufacturing. Those sectors are much more affected by the mobility restrictions and capital outflows than other sectors that are still affected, but not as much, like, for example, education or health services. But what is interesting here is, as you rightly pointed out, that's not having the same impact across the board in terms of the labor market. Women and those that are working in the informal sector, especially urban informal sector, are going to be very much impacted. Just to give you one statistics, you have about 9 million women that currently we identify as working in sectors that are vulnerable to COVID-19 more so than others, right? So this 9 million women right now are at risk of losing their jobs and of course not being able to provide for their families. This is mainly because they work in sectors like retail, or they are also entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs right now are being more affected than others, right? And also, it's not going to be the same impact across the country. The North will be impacted more, and this is for two reasons. One, because fewer jobs are being created in the North, and also because you have more people that live closer to the poverty line. So they're only just one shock away from falling into poverty. So if something happens to the income of a household, they're very likely to fall into poverty. And we're seeing that is expected to be pretty prominent between 2020 and 2022.
Okay, Marco, I have two questions for you, and you have to answer it in a minute because I have to come back to Shubham. Shubham, just hold on a bit. You'll end the show for me. Let's take a look at the financial sector, which you also highlighted in the report. We've seen Nigeria's financial sector at least not really so impacted because we saw a lot of the banks even churning out good numbers during the recession. I want you to comment on that. The other part which I would also want you to comment is what kind of things do you expect from Nigeria's private sector moving forward that will aid the recovery, and the global economic response that we're seeing around the second wave of COVID-19 vaccines coming in? What do you expect for Nigeria, or what does the World Bank expect to see for Nigeria?
So the financial sector, two things. One is that the financial sector was entering the crisis in a better shape than other sectors. Financial profitability had been improving, and non-performing loans have been decreasing. Now what we're seeing is an increase in non-performing loans, which is expected given the size of the shock. But that non-performing loans are expected to increase more going forward because there has been a lot of action by the central bank to try to contain the shock and also to provide forbearance for banks. So right now we're not seeing that full extent. So that's what I'll say on the financial sector. But on the side of the broader private sector, definitely an opportunity to come together, to invest and to seek opportunities, and also to promote better coordination between the government and the private sector, which has been essential in previous crises, and definitely an opportunity to doing something here. Okay,
Marco, quickly, global economic response, where do you say it? 10 seconds.
So I think, we're expected that the global recovery will take some more time now that with the second wave. We're updating our projections. Something that I want to highlight is that risks are on the downside, and there is a lot of uncertainty. And at times of uncertainty, it's better to take action.
Okay. Shubham, lastly, what is Nigeria's economic outlook? I know the World Bank has brought up forecast and prediction for this year, but it's hinged on what?
Basically, it hinges on whether the government, but not just government, business, political elites, decides to take up the challenge and see this as a critical juncture, or kind of business as usual. And business as usual would be, kind of the 2016 recovery coming out of 2016. I think that's the key thing. Trust with citizens. Everything, government is doing a lot. CBN is doing a lot. But for that trust to be there, citizens to recognize it, transparency. And with investors, it's certainty.
That brings me to the Transparency International Corruption Index that came out, and it was worse for us, but it's not for you to discuss. Thank you very much
for
coming on the show. I've been speaking with Shubham Chaudhuri, who is the country director for Nigeria World Bank, and Marco Hernandez, the lead economist for Nigeria World Bank. Thank you to you both for being on today's edition of the program. Thank you all also for watching. Please join us again Tuesday for another edition, another topic. I am Nnaji. Be the best you can be the change you want to see. Don't forget to wear a mask.